The National Museum of History stands silent in the morning light, its marble floors reflecting the emptiness of 47 display cases. Each one should contain a pre-Columbian artifact worth millions, pieces that represent a $50 million cultural exchange agreement that Carmen Whitfield spent 2 years building from scratch. Instead, she stands alone in the gallery while outside, reporters gather like vultures sensing blood. Through the museum's glass doors, she watches Helena Park whisper urgently into Che Min-jun's ear. The CEO of Che Group observes Carmen with the calculating coldness of a man who views every interaction as a business transaction. His charcoal gray Armani suit costs more than most diplomats make in 3 months, and the Patek Philippe watch on his wrist catches the light like a beacon of inherited power. Carmen adjusts her navy blue blazer, the small American flag pin on her lapel feeling heavier than usual. At 32, she's negotiated treaties with dictators and stared down corruption in 3 different countries. But something about Min-jun's presence makes her pulse quicken with a mixture of irritation and unwanted awareness. The museum director approaches with the careful steps of a man delivering a death sentence. Ms. Whitfield. The media is asking questions about the delayed shipment. Tell them we're addressing minor logistical concerns, she replies, not taking her eyes off the man who holds her career in his hands. But Min-jun is already moving toward the entrance, Helena beside him, like a shadow in blood-red designer clothing. The reporters part for them, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Carmen realizes this isn't a private meeting. It's an execution designed for public consumption. She walks toward the microphone setup, her heels echoing in the vast space. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. This cultural exchange represents more than art. It represents historical dignity for both our nations. With all due respect, Dr. Whitfield. Min-jun's voice cuts through her prepared remarks like a blade. Dignity doesn't pay for conservation infrastructure. We require concrete financial guarantees and measurable outcomes. The room falls silent. Carmen slowly turns to face him, her amber eyes meeting his cold, dark gaze for the first time. The contact lasts 3 eternal seconds. Not attraction, but the recognition of equal forces about to collide. She sees past the corporate armor to something else, something wounded and carefully hidden behind executive authority. Mr. Che, she responds in perfect Korean, her voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. Some values don't fit into spreadsheets. Perhaps that's why they're called priceless. The shocked silence that follows is broken by the rapid clicking of camera shutters. Helena's perfectly composed expression flickers with something like fear, and Min-jun's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. How did this American diplomat learn to speak Korean with the fluency of a native? And what else is she hiding behind that diplomatic smile that could destroy everything he's spent years building? Can a cultural agreement survive when the 2 people negotiating it speak completely different languages of the heart? Subscribe to find out what happens when diplomatic immunity meets corporate power in the boardrooms and tea houses of Seoul. The American consulate in Yongu exists in the space between worlds. Korean efficiency meets American directness in hallways lined with portraits of presidents and maps of territories that feel impossibly distant from Seoul's neon-lit streets. Carmen's office overlooks the Han River, and on clear days, she can see the Lotte World Tower where Min-jun conducts his business like a modern emperor. 3 hours after the museum confrontation, Carmen sits across from Ambassador Robert Hayes, whose 58 years of diplomatic service have taught him to read the subtext in every international incident. His gray hair is perfectly styled, his traditional diplomatic suit pressed to military standards, but his eyes hold the warmth of a man who remembers what it's like to be young and idealistic. The Korean media is calling it the Great Cultural Standoff, Ambassador Hayes says, sliding a tablet across the mahogany desk. Your Korean response has been translated 17 different ways, all of them suggesting various levels of diplomatic aggression. Carmen scrolls through the headlines, her stomach sinking with each translation. American diplomat insults Korean business practices. Cultural exchange becomes international incident. Che Group CEO questions American negotiation ethics. Sir, I was protecting the integrity of... I know what you were protecting. Hayes leans back in his leather chair. The question is whether this cultural agreement is worth salvaging, or if we need to start planning damage control. Through her office window, Carmen watches the city that has become her home over the past 2 years. Seoul's contradictions mirror her own. Ancient palaces shadowed by glass towers, traditional tea ceremonies followed by business meetings conducted in 3 languages, honor codes that clash with global market demands. The artifacts matter, she says quietly, not just as museum pieces, but as symbols of respect between cultures. If we let this fail because one CEO thinks everything has a price tag, one CEO who controls 15% of Korea's construction industry and maintains significant political influence, Hayes' voice carries the weight of geopolitical reality. Carmen, I've known you since you were a junior attaché in Bogota. You're brilliant, dedicated, and you care more about historical justice than your own career advancement. But sometimes caring isn't enough. The intercom buzzes with the secretary's voice. Ambassador, you have a call from the Che Foundation. They're requesting a private meeting with Dr. Whitfield. Hayes and Carmen exchange glances. In diplomatic circles, private meetings following public confrontations usually mean one of 2 things: genuine reconciliation or calculated destruction. Accept the meeting, Carmen says. But here, on neutral ground. Carmen, if he wants to negotiate, he can come to us. I won't be summoned to his corporate throne room like a junior executive. 2 hours later, Min Jun arrives at the consulate with an entourage that includes Helena, 2 legal advisors, and Park Soo-jin, his executive secretary, whose 28 years show in the competent way she manages chaos. Soo-jin wears wire-rimmed glasses and carries a leather portfolio that contains either salvation or doom for the cultural agreement. The conference room has been prepared for diplomatic warfare. American flags balanced with Korean ones, bottled water that no one will drink, and translations of every document related to the cultural exchange. Carmen enters wearing a different blazer, this one charcoal gray that matches her adversary's suit. A subtle psychological tactic she learned during hostage negotiations in Colombia. Min Jun looks younger in the fluorescent lighting, his angular face showing the stress lines of a man carrying corporate responsibility. When he removes his suit jacket, Carmen notices a thin scar on his wrist, barely visible beneath his expensive watch. Dr. Whitfield, he begins in English, his accent slight but precise. I owe you an apology. The words hang in the air like smoke. Helena's expression hardens into something resembling panic, while Soo-jin makes rapid notes in the margins of her documents. For which part? Carmen asks. The public ambush, or the suggestion that American cultural values are naive? For allowing personal frustrations to affect professional judgment? Min Jun sits across from her, his hands folded with the precision of someone who learned self-control through necessity. The Che Foundation has invested significant resources in this cultural exchange because we believe in its importance. And yet you questioned its value in front of international media. I questioned the execution, not the concept. There's a difference. Carmen studies his face, looking for the tells that reveal truth from corporate maneuvering. His eyes remain steady, but something flickers when she mentions media attention. Not guilt exactly, but discomfort with public scrutiny. Mr. Che, let's establish some ground rules. This is a cultural agreement between institutions, not a hostile takeover between corporations. The artifacts are not commodities. They're cultural treasures that deserve respect regardless of their monetary value. Agreed. Provided you acknowledge that respect without proper funding becomes negligence. The Met's insurance requirements alone are covered by our existing protocols. Carmen slides a folder across the table. Everything you're asking for was addressed in our 3rd round negotiations. The question is whether you were listening, or if someone else was providing conflicting information. Min Jun's gaze flicks toward Helena so briefly that only someone trained in reading micro-expressions would catch it. In that moment, Carmen realizes this negotiation has layers she hasn't considered. Perhaps, Min Jun says carefully, we should schedule individual meetings to address specific concerns, away from external pressures. Helena starts to protest, but Soo-jin cuts her off with the gentle authority of someone who protects her employer from his own political mistakes. Sajangnim, your calendar is flexible tomorrow afternoon. Carmen finds herself agreeing to a private meeting with a man who either wants to salvage the cultural agreement or destroy her career with surgical precision. Either way, she's walking into unknown territory where diplomatic immunity might not protect her from the kind of warfare that happens in boardrooms instead of battlefields. But as Min-jun gathers his papers and prepares to leave, he pauses at the door. "Dr. Whitfield, you're Korean this morning. Where did you learn to speak with such precision?" The question catches her off guard, not because it's unexpected, but because his tone suggests genuine curiosity rather than strategic probing. "Language is a bridge," she replies. "I prefer building bridges to burning them." After they leave, Ambassador Hayes finds Carmen staring out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the early evening. "What's your assessment?" "He's not what he appears to be," Carmen says. "There are contradictions. The public hardline versus private courtesy, the corporate reputation versus personal behavior. And Helena Park is managing him, not just advising him." "Meaning?" "Meaning this cultural agreement might be secondary to whatever game is being played inside the Che group. The question is whether I'm a pawn or a player." But what Carmen doesn't know as she prepares to meet Min-jun on neutral ground is that some games have been in motion for years, waiting for the right catalyst to trigger moves that will change everything. Not just for the cultural agreement, but for two people who thought they understood the rules until they discovered the game itself was an illusion. The traditional tea house in Insadong exists in Seoul's past and present simultaneously. Paper screens filter modern city light, while the wooden floors whisper with centuries of conversations. Carmen arrives 10 minutes early, a diplomatic habit that served her well in negotiations from Bogota to Brussels. She chose this location specifically because it levels the playing field. Min-jun can't rely on corporate power when they're surrounded by the kind of cultural tradition he publicly claims to respect. She settles into a low cushion at a table near the window, wearing a navy dress that strikes the balance between professional and approachable. The American flag pin remains on her lapel, not as a statement of nationalism, but as a reminder that she represents something larger than herself. Min-jun arrives precisely on time, but he's alone. No Helena, no legal team, no Soo-jin taking notes. He's dressed more casually. Dark jeans and a black sweater that makes him look younger. Less intimidating. Almost human. "Dr. Whitfield," he says, settling across from her with the careful movements of someone navigating unfamiliar territory. "Carmen, please. We're not in the boardroom now. The tea ceremony that follows provides neutral ground for observation." Min-jun's hands are steady as he pours, his movements practiced but not ceremonial. This isn't performance. It's genuine comfort with tradition, which surprises Carmen given his reputation for cold modernization. "You're not what I expected," she admits as steam rises between them. "Neither are you. Most American diplomats I've met speak Korean like they learned it from textbooks. You speak it like you learned it from people," Carmen finishes. "I lived in a Korean-American neighborhood during graduate school. My landlady, Mrs. Kim, insisted I speak Korean with her family. She said language without heart is just noise." Something shifts in Min-jun's expression, not quite a smile, but a softening of the defensive walls he maintains. Mrs. Kim sounds wise. She was. She also made the best kimchi jjigae in Los Angeles, and wouldn't let me skip meals even when I was too broke to properly contribute to groceries. "Broke? You?" The question carries surprise, not judgment. Carmen sips her tea, considering how much truth to share. "Cultural attaché positions don't pay well, especially when you're starting out. I lived on rice and instant noodles for 8 months while I built my language skills and cultural competency. Yet you chose this career anyway. Because some things matter more than comfort." She meets his gaze directly. "Which brings us to why we're here. The cultural agreement isn't just about artifacts, Mr. Che. It's about showing that two countries can share their histories with respect and trust." "Min-jun," he says quietly. "If we're not in the boardroom, then we're Min-jun and Carmen." The shift from formal address feels surprisingly intimate, as if they've crossed an invisible line from diplomatic opponents to something approaching equals. Carmen realizes that beneath the corporate armor, Min-jun carries himself with the careful precision of someone who's learned that vulnerability is dangerous. "Then tell me, Min-jun, Why did you agree to this private meeting? Because everything about your public behavior suggests you prefer conducting business through intermediaries. He's quiet for a long moment, watching the tea swirl in his cup. When he speaks, his voice carries something that might be honesty. Because you're right about the spreadsheets. Some values can't be quantified, and I've spent so long focusing on numbers that I've forgotten how to measure what matters. The admission hangs between them like a bridge neither expected to build. Carmen finds herself leaning forward slightly, drawn in by the glimpse of the man beneath the CEO facade. What made you forget? Responsibility, expectations. The weight of carrying a company that employs 30,000 people and supports their families. Minjun's fingers trace the rim of his teacup. When that many livelihoods depend on your decisions, everything becomes a calculation of risk and benefit. Even cultural preservation, especially cultural preservation. Museums don't generate profit, cultural exchanges don't boost stock prices, and philanthropic gestures can be seen as frivolous spending by shareholders who only care about quarterly returns. Carmen studies his face, seeing past the corporate justifications to something deeper. But you're still here, still trying to make this agreement work, despite the shareholders and the quarterly returns. Because some things matter more than comfort, he says, echoing her earlier words with a slight smile that transforms his entire face. The smile catches Carmen off guard, not because it's unexpected, but because it reveals the person Minjun might be when he's not performing the role of ruthless CEO. She feels something shift inside her chest. Not attraction, exactly, but recognition of kinship with someone who carries the weight of representing something larger than themselves. The obstacles aren't just financial, Minjun continues. There are people within my organization who prefer maintaining status quo to embracing cultural risk. Helena Park, among others. His jaw tightens slightly. Helena has been with the company for 15 years. She's efficient, connected, and completely dedicated to protecting the Che Group's interests. But sometimes protection becomes control, and control becomes... He stops, as if realizing he's revealing more than intended. The conversation is interrupted by Carmen's phone buzzing with an urgent message. She glances at the screen and frowns. The Korean Arts Council is requesting an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Apparently, there are concerns about American commitment to the cultural exchange. Minjun's expression darkens. That's Helena's network. She's escalating the conflict instead of allowing us to resolve it privately. Why would she want the agreement to fail? Because success means acknowledging that some partnerships transcend traditional power structures. Helena prefers working within systems she can control. Carmen realizes she's witnessing something more complex than corporate politics. This is about competing visions of how Korea should engage with the world. The cultural agreement has become a proxy for larger questions about tradition, modernization, and cultural identity. So what do you propose? She asks. That we present a united front. Show Helena and the Arts Council that American and Korean approaches can complement each other rather than compete. The suggestion carries risks that extend beyond professional collaboration. Carmen recognizes that aligning with Minjun publicly might protect the cultural agreement, but it could also make her a target for the same forces that seem determined to undermine him. United front how? Joint appearances. Collaborative proposals. Public demonstration that the cultural exchange serves both American and Korean interests. Minjun leans forward, his voice carrying urgency. Carmen, if this agreement fails, it won't just affect our respective careers. It will send a message to other cultural institutions that international cooperation is too politically risky to pursue. And she sees the larger implications he's describing. The ripple effects that could impact cultural exchanges worldwide if Seoul and Washington can't demonstrate successful collaboration. The weight of representation that they both carry. All right, she says, but I have conditions. Such as? Complete transparency between us. No corporate maneuvering, no diplomatic doublespeak. If we're going to work together, we work as partners, not as strategic assets manipulating each other for advantage. Minjun extends his hand across the table. Partners. The handshake lasts longer than professional courtesy requires, both of them acknowledging that they've just committed to something that extends beyond the cultural agreement. As they prepare to leave the tea house, Carmen realizes that the most dangerous thing about Min-jun isn't his corporate power or political connections. It's the way his rare, genuine smile makes her forget that she's supposed to be protecting herself from exactly this kind of complication. But as they step into Seoul's neon-lit evening, neither of them notices the black sedan parked across the street, or the camera lens that has been documenting their meeting with the patience of someone who understands that the most valuable intelligence comes from watching powerful people reveal their vulnerabilities. Tomorrow's emergency meeting will be more than a discussion of cultural policy. It will be the beginning of a campaign designed to test whether their newfound partnership can survive the kind of pressure that turns allies into enemies and trust into the most dangerous currency of all. The Seoul Arts Council building resembles a fortress designed by architects who understood that cultural institutions need to project both accessibility and authority. Carmen arrives at 8:30 a.m., 30 minutes before the scheduled emergency meeting, only to discover that Min-jun has been waiting in the lobby since 8, reviewing documents with the focused intensity of a general preparing for war. He looks up as she approaches, and she notices the tension lines around his eyes that suggest a sleepless night. "Carmen, thank you for arriving early. I figured we'd need time to coordinate our approach," she replies, settling into the chair beside him. "What's our situation?" "Worse than I anticipated." Min-jun hands her a tablet displaying Korean news headlines. The story has evolved overnight. We're no longer just dealing with questions about the cultural agreement. Carmen scrolls through the articles, her stomach sinking with each translation. American Diplomat's secret Korean connections raise security questions. Che Group CEO abandons traditional advisors for foreign influence. Cultural exchange or cultural infiltration. Helena's network has been busy, she mutters. It's more than Helena. Someone has been feeding information to journalists, details about your background, your previous assignments, your language training. This is coordinated opposition designed to undermine both of our credibilities. Carmen looks at the photos accompanying the articles. Her graduate school apartment building in Los Angeles, the Korean American Community Center where she volunteered, even a picture of Mrs. Kim's family restaurant. Someone has been investigating her history with professional thoroughness. Who has access to this level of background intelligence? Government security services, corporate intelligence networks, anyone with the resources to conduct comprehensive surveillance. Min-jun's voice carries grim recognition. "Carmen, I think we've stumbled into something larger than cultural politics." Before she can respond, Park Soo-jin appears in the lobby, moving with the urgent efficiency of someone managing a crisis. Her usual composure shows cracks of strain, and she carries a leather portfolio that bulges with what looks like damage control documentation. "Sajangnim," she says quietly. The Arts Council members arrived early. They're already in conference with Director Kim. Director Kim Sung-ho, the man who questioned Carmen's background at the quarterly dinner, whose predatory smile and calculated questions suggested someone comfortable with using information as a weapon. Carmen realizes this meeting was orchestrated to put them at maximum disadvantage. "How many council members?" Min-jun asks. 7. Plus Director Kim, Helena Sunbae, and 2 representatives from the Korean Cultural Protection Institute. Carmen does the math. 10 people aligned against their partnership, each with institutional authority and cultural credibility. Even if she and Min-jun present a united front, they'll be outnumbered 5-1 by people who've already decided the cultural agreement represents some kind of threat. Any allies in the room? Soo-jin's expression suggests the answer is no, but she phrases it diplomatically. Professor Lee from Seoul National University's Art History Department is present. She's typically neutral in cultural policy discussions. As they prepare to enter the conference room, Min-jun turns to Carmen with something like apology in his eyes. "I want you to know that regardless of what happens in there, I'm grateful for your partnership. The cultural agreement matters, but so does the principle we're defending." "Which principle?" "That cultural exchange should be driven by genuine respect, not political convenience." The conference room has been arranged for maximum intimidation. A long mahogany table with Carmen and Min-jun seated at one end, while their opponents spread across the opposite side like a tribunal. The Korean and American flags hang behind them, symbols that should represent cooperation, but today feel more like evidence of conflicting loyalties. Director Kim opens the session with the formal courtesy that makes Korean confrontation particularly devastating. Dr. Whitfield, Mr. Che, thank you for joining us to address concerns that have arisen regarding the proposed cultural exchange. Helena sits 2 seats to Kim's right, her blood-red blazer standing out like a declaration of war. Her smile never reaches her eyes as she opens her leather portfolio and arranges documents with surgical precision. The primary concern, Kim continues, relates to questions about the cultural and security implications of American involvement in Korean cultural preservation. Specifically, Helena adds, her voice carrying the authority of someone who's prepared for this moment. Questions about Dr. Whitfield's extensive connections to Korean American communities and whether these relationships represent appropriate cultural appreciation or inappropriate cultural infiltration. Carmen feels her temper flare, but Ambassador Hayes's voice echoes in her memory. Never let them see anger. Convert fury into precision. Director Kim, could you clarify what you mean by inappropriate cultural infiltration? The concern is whether American diplomatic interest in Korean cultural artifacts represents genuine scholarly appreciation or strategic intelligence gathering disguised as cultural exchange. The accusation hangs in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Carmen realizes they're not just questioning her professional competence. They're suggesting she's a spy using cultural diplomacy as cover for intelligence operations. That's a serious allegation, Min-jun says quietly, his voice carrying warning. Are you prepared to provide evidence for such claims? We're prepared to share information that raises legitimate questions about the appropriateness of Dr. Whitfield's involvement in sensitive cultural matters. Helena slides a photograph across the table. Carmen recognizes it immediately, herself at age 25, standing with Mrs. Kim's family outside their restaurant in Los Angeles. But the context has been removed, the innocent cultural exchange reframed as something suspicious. This photograph shows Dr. Whitfield maintaining extensive social connections with Korean nationals during her graduate studies. Connections that continued even after she began her diplomatic career. You mean friendships, Carmen says evenly. Relationships with people who helped me understand Korean culture and language. Relationships that provided access to Korean cultural knowledge that some might consider sensitive or proprietary. Min-jun leans forward, his corporate politeness masking rising anger. Helena, are you suggesting that cultural understanding is a form of espionage? I'm suggesting that we should examine the motivations behind Dr. Ma-ai Whitfield's exceptional commitment to Korean cultural preservation, her language skills, her cultural knowledge, her passion for this particular agreement. Its remarkable dedication for someone with no personal connection to Korea. Carmen realizes Helena has been setting this trap for weeks, building a narrative that transforms her qualifications into evidence of suspicious motivation. Every conversation with Min-jun, every cultural reference, every demonstration of Korean language ability has been reframed as potential intelligence gathering. Director Kim, Carmen says, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. I'd like to address these concerns directly. My commitment to Korean cultural preservation comes from the same source as my commitment to cultural preservation worldwide. The belief that human heritage belongs to humanity, not to political interests. A beautiful sentiment, Kim replies. But can you provide evidence that your interest is purely academic rather than strategic? The trap closes completely. Carmen realizes that any evidence she provides, cultural activities, language study, friendships, will be reinterpreted as support for the infiltration theory. She's being asked to prove a negative, which is logically impossible and politically devastating. But then Min-jun stands, his movement commanding attention from everyone in the room. I can provide that evidence. Helena's confident expression flickers with uncertainty. Min-jun, what are you? Dr. Whitfield's cultural knowledge and language skills aren't evidence of espionage. They're evidence of the exact cultural competency we should require from anyone involved in international cultural exchange. His voice carries the authority of someone who's spent years making decisions under pressure. Her dedication to this agreement isn't suspicious, it's exemplary. You're allowing personal feelings to compromise professional judgment, Helena says, her mask of professional courtesy slipping slightly. I'm allowing professional competence to override xenophobic paranoia. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Around the table, Council members shift uncomfortably as Min-jun challenges not just Helena's accusations, but the underlying assumptions about cultural exchange between Korea and America. Director Kim attempts to regain control of the meeting. Mr. Che, while we appreciate your confidence in Dr. Whitfield's abilities, my confidence is based on professional observation and cultural results. Dr. Whitfield has demonstrated more genuine respect for Korean cultural values than anyone else involved in this negotiation. Carmen realizes that Min-jun is risking his own reputation to defend hers, challenging the very people whose support he needs for corporate success. The partnership they discussed over tea has become something deeper, mutual defense against forces determined to destroy what they're trying to build together. But Helena isn't finished. Min-jun, your judgment regarding Dr. Whitfield may be compromised by factors beyond professional assessment. Perhaps we should examine your own recent behavior and decision-making patterns. The threat is subtle but clear. Challenge our narrative about Carmen, and we'll create a narrative about you. Carmen sees the calculation in Helena's eyes and realizes this was always the real target. Not the cultural agreement, but Min-jun himself. What are you suggesting, Helena? Min-jun asks, his voice dangerously quiet. I'm suggesting that your recent departure from established corporate protocols, your private meetings with foreign diplomats, your willingness to risk company reputation for personal projects, these behaviors represent a pattern that concerns those of us dedicated to protecting the Che Group's interests. Carmen understands the game now. Destroy the cultural agreement by destroying the people supporting it. Make their partnership so politically toxic that continuing the negotiation becomes impossible. But she also sees something Helena has miscalculated. The way the other council members are watching this confrontation with growing discomfort. These are academics and cultural preservationists, not corporate politicians. They came here concerned about cultural appropriation, not to witness a professional assassination. Carmen stands, her decision crystallizing into action. Director Kim, I appreciate the council's concerns about cultural sensitivity. I propose that we address these concerns through transparency rather than termination. What do you mean? Open the entire cultural exchange to public oversight. Document every stage of the negotiation, every artifact transfer, every cultural consultation. If the council believes my involvement represents a security risk, then let's create a process transparent enough that any irregularities would be immediately visible. The suggestion catches everyone off guard, including Min-jun. Carmen is proposing to eliminate the diplomatic privacy that usually protects international negotiations, making herself completely vulnerable to public scrutiny. Dr. Whitfield. Professor Lee speaks for the first time, her voice thoughtful. Such transparency would be unprecedented in cultural diplomacy. So is public questioning of a diplomat's cultural competency based on her language skills and international friendships. Carmen meets the professor's gaze directly. If we're going to establish new precedents, let's establish ones that serve cultural preservation, rather than cultural paranoia. Helena realizes the momentum of the meeting has shifted. The council can't authorize such unprecedented transparency without extensive consultation. Then consult, Min-jun says. Dr. Whitfield has proposed a solution that addresses every concern raised while maintaining the cultural agreement's integrity. The question is whether this council prioritizes cultural preservation or political maneuvering. Director Kim looks around the table, reading the expressions of council members who came expecting to cancel a problematic negotiation, but are now being asked to approve revolutionary transparency and cultural diplomacy. We'll need time to consider this proposal, he says finally. Of course, Carmen replies. Take all the time you need. But while you're considering, the artifacts remain in limbo, the cultural exchange stays frozen, and both our institutions continue to miss opportunities for meaningful collaboration. As the meeting adjourns, Helena approaches Min-jun with the controlled fury of someone whose careful plans have been disrupted. This isn't over. Your loyalty to the company. My loyalty is to values that transcend quarterly profit reports, Min-jun replies. Perhaps it's time you remembered what those values are. Outside the building, Carmen and Min-jun stand in Seoul's morning sunlight, both understanding that they've just escalated a cultural disagreement into something approaching war. Their partnership is now public knowledge, their reputations linked for better or worse. Are you certain about the transparency proposal? Minjun asks. Absolutely. If they want to examine our motivations, let them examine everything. Sunlight is the best disinfectant for political accusations. And if the transparency reveals things that complicate our positions? Carmen looks at him, recognizing that they've reached a point where trust becomes the most valuable currency. Then we deal with complications honestly. Isn't that what partnership means? But as they walk toward their respective offices, neither of them sees Helena watching from the Arts Council building's upper windows, her phone already dialing numbers that will set new forces in motion. The game has changed, but it's far from over. And somewhere in Seoul's labyrinth of corporate and political connections, other players are preparing moves that will test whether transparency can protect them from the kind of warfare that destroys careers and lives with equal precision. The cultural agreement has become secondary to something larger, a battle for the soul of international cooperation in an age when cultural exchange can be weaponized as easily as celebrated. The private dining room at Gyeon exists in the intersection of Seoul's past and present, traditional Korean architecture housing Michelin-starred cuisine, a place where business leaders conduct negotiations that shape the country's future over meals that honor its history. Carmen arrives 15 minutes early, a habit that served her well in diplomatic environments where punctuality signals respect. She chose this location specifically because it levels cultural playing fields. Neither American corporate power nor Korean institutional authority matters much when you're sitting on floor cushions sharing banchan with someone who's become more than a negotiating partner. Minjun enters precisely on time, but his usual corporate composure shows stress fractures. His suit is impeccable, but Carmen notices he's removed his tie, and the expensive watch on his wrist seems less like a status symbol and more like armor against uncertainty. "Thank you for arranging this," he says, settling across from her with the careful movements of someone navigating emotional terrain as unfamiliar as diplomatic protocol. "After this morning's ambush, we needed neutral ground." Carmen pours tea with movements Mrs. Kim taught her years ago. Ceremony as diplomacy. Ritual as bridge building. "How are you handling Helena's escalation campaign?" "About as well as you'd expect from someone discovering that 15 years of trust was actually 15 years of careful manipulation." The admission carries weight that goes beyond corporate politics. Carmen realizes that Helena's betrayal cuts deeper than professional disagreement. It represents the shattering of assumptions about loyalty and protection that Minjun built his leadership style around. The meal arrives in waves. Kimchi jjigae that fills the room with the complex aromas of fermentation and comfort. Bulgogi that requires shared cooking over the table's built-in grill. Banchan that encourages conversation through the intimacy of sharing small dishes. Carmen watches Minjun navigate the meal with natural grace, his earlier tension easing as the traditional setting works its diplomatic magic. "This kimchi," he says after the first spoonful of jjigae, "tastes exactly like my grandmother's recipe." "Good kimchi is like good diplomacy," Carmen replies. "Takes time, requires patience, and gets better with age." Minjun actually laughs, the first genuine expression of joy she's seen from him since they met. The sound transforms his face, revealing the person he might be, without the weight of corporate responsibility and family expectations. "Carmen, can I ask you something personal?" She nods, recognizing that their partnership has reached the point where professional boundaries need to expand to include human curiosity. "Why Korea? Your career could have taken you anywhere. Europe, South America, Asia Pacific. What drew you specifically to Korean culture and diplomacy?" The question touches something Carmen rarely discusses with professional colleagues. She considers how much truth to share with someone whose trust she needs, but whose long-term place in her life remains uncertain. "My parents," she says finally. "I lost them when I was 19. A diplomatic convoy attack in Somalia. Dad was a cultural attaché. Mom was a humanitarian coordinator. They died trying to protect historical artifacts from destruction during civil conflict." Minjun's expression shifts from curiosity to something approaching comprehension. "Cultural preservation became personal for you. It became essential. Watching my parents die for the principle that human heritage transcends political boundaries. It changes how you understand the stakes involved in cultural diplomacy." Is that why you speak Korean so well? Why you understand cultural nuance that most diplomats treat as professional necessity rather than personal mission? Carmen nods, surprised by how accurately he's read her motivations. Mrs. Kim and her family didn't just teach me language. They taught me that cultural understanding requires emotional investment, not just intellectual study. They showed me that preserving culture means preserving the human connections that give artifacts meaning. Minjun is quiet for a long moment, using his chopsticks to arrange banchan while processing her revelation. When he speaks, his voice carries reciprocal honesty. I envy you that clarity of purpose. I've spent 10 years running a company because it was expected, protecting family legacy because it was required, making decisions that serve shareholders rather than values. What would you do if expectations weren't a factor? Build things that last beyond quarterly reports. Create cultural institutions that serve communities rather than profit margins. He pauses. Maybe partner with idealistic diplomats on projects that matter more than stock prices. The admission hangs between them like a bridge neither expected to construct. Carmen realizes that Minjun's support for the cultural agreement isn't just professional courtesy. It represents his attempt to align corporate resources with personal values. The transparency proposal, she says. Are you certain you're prepared for that level of scrutiny? Because once we open the negotiations to public oversight, everything becomes visible. Your motivations, your corporate decisions, your personal investment in this partnership. Let them look, Minjun says with quiet determination. I'm tired of conducting business in shadows, tired of protecting interests that don't align with principles. Their conversation is interrupted by Minjun's phone buzzing with an urgent message. His expression darkens as he reads the screen. What is it? Helena has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. She's presenting a motion of no confidence in my leadership based on recent erratic decision-making and compromised judgment regarding foreign partnerships. Carmen sets down her chopsticks, understanding the escalation Helena has chosen. She's using our partnership as evidence that you're unfit to lead the company. More than that, she's suggesting that my commitment to the cultural agreement represents prioritizing personal relationships over corporate responsibilities. The implication is clear but unspoken. Helena is suggesting that Minjun's defense of Carmen represents romantic compromise of professional judgment. Whether or not it's true, the accusation alone could destroy both their careers. What do you need from me? Carmen asks. Distance. Public professional distance that demonstrates our partnership is based on institutional merit rather than personal attachment. Absolutely not. Minjun looks at her with surprise. Carmen, if you maintain support for me, Helena will use that as evidence supporting her motion. Your diplomatic career will survive whatever Helena throws at it, because diplomatic careers are built on results, not gossip. Corporate leadership, on the other hand, requires board confidence, which means you need allies, not strategic abandonment. You're suggesting we maintain the partnership despite the political risk? I'm suggesting we accelerate the partnership. Give Helena so much transparency and public accountability that her accusations become obviously false. Make the cultural agreement so visible and successful that opposing it becomes politically untenable. Minjun stares at her as if she's suggested they declare war on Seoul itself. That would require presenting joint public statements, coordinated media appearances, complete integration of our negotiation strategies. Yes, full partnership, complete transparency, and results that speak louder than Helena's accusations. Carmen, that level of collaboration will make us political targets for anyone who prefers the status quo. Not just Helena, but institutional forces in both our governments who benefit from cultural isolation. Then we'd better make sure our results justify the risks. The decision crystallizes between them without formal agreement. They're choosing each other's professional survival over their own political safety. Carmen realizes that what began as a cultural negotiation has evolved into something that feels dangerously close to mutual trust. As they prepare to leave Gayaon, Minjun pauses at the door. Carmen, there's something you should know about tomorrow's board meeting. What? Helena won't just question my judgment, she'll question yours. Your background, your motivations, your professional competence. The attack will be personal and designed to be publicly damaging. Let her try. I've been defending cultural preservation against political attacks for 8 years. Helena Park doesn't intimidate me. But as they step into Seoul's evening air, Carmen realizes that the most dangerous thing about Helena isn't her corporate connections or political maneuvering. It's her understanding that the partnership between Min-jun and Carmen has evolved beyond professional necessity into something that could be used against them both. Tomorrow's board meeting will test whether transparency can protect them from the kind of warfare that destroys careers by destroying the people who build them. The cultural agreement has become secondary to the larger question of whether two people from different worlds can trust each other enough to survive the forces determined to tear them apart. But tonight, walking through Seoul's neon-lit streets, they move with the synchronized steps of people who've chosen to face uncertainty together rather than safety apart. The most dangerous game in international diplomacy isn't between countries. It's between the people who believe in building bridges and those who profit from maintaining walls. The Lotte World Tower pierces Seoul's skyline like a spear of glass and steel, its upper floors housing the corporate nerve center of the Che Group empire. On the 62nd floor, the boardroom exists as a monument to Korean business power. Mahogany surfaces that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Windows offering panoramic views of a city built on ambition and hierarchy. Min-jun arrives at 7 a.m., 2 hours before the emergency board meeting, to find Helena already occupying the space like a general preparing for siege warfare. She's transformed the room into a presentation theater, complete with projectors displaying financial charts, legal documents, and photographs arranged to support her narrative of compromised leadership. Helena, Min-jun says, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone navigating a minefield. Impressive preparation for a motion that was called less than 24 hours ago. She turns from her laptop with the satisfied expression of someone whose planning has reached fruition. Some concerns require immediate attention, especially when they threaten institutional stability. Min-jun studies the evidence she's arranged, corporate financial reports highlighting the cultural agreement's costs, legal analyses questioning the diplomatic partnership's prudence, and photographs of him and Carmen that have been carefully selected to suggest inappropriate intimacy rather than professional collaboration. You've been building this case for weeks. I've been protecting this company for months. Your recent decisions, the cultural agreement, the partnership with Dr. Whitfield, the public confrontations with established Korean cultural institutions, represent a pattern of judgment that concerns everyone invested in the Che Group's success. Including you? Helena's smile could cut glass. Especially me. I've invested 15 years building relationships and reputation that protect this company from exactly the kind of international complications you seem determined to pursue. The other board members begin arriving at 8:30. Director Kim from yesterday's Arts Council confrontation, 3 senior executives whose loyalty to Min-jun has been purchased with stock options and performance bonuses, 2 external advisors whose independence depends on maintaining neutrality, and Min-jun's mother, Han Young-suk, whose presence adds family authority to corporate proceedings. Young-suk enters with the regal bearing of someone who built the Che Group's cultural reputation through decades of strategic philanthropy. At 65, she remains formidable, silver hair styled to perfection, traditional Korean dress that signals respect for ceremony, and the kind of quiet authority that makes corporate executives defer without question. Mother, Min-jun says, standing as she takes her seat at the head of the table. Min-jun, she replies, her tone carrying affection tempered by concern. I understand we're addressing questions about recent business decisions. Helena activates her presentation with the precision of someone who's rehearsed every transition. Esteemed board members, thank you for accommodating this urgent session. The matters we're discussing today concern fundamental questions about leadership judgment and corporate risk management. The first slide displays financial projections showing the cultural agreement's cost without corresponding revenue generation. Helena's analysis makes the project appear financially irresponsible rather than culturally valuable. As you can see, the proposed cultural exchange requires significant capital investment with no direct return on investment. While cultural philanthropy serves important social functions, the scale and scope of this commitment exceed established parameters for charitable giving. Director Kim nods, with the satisfaction of someone whose earlier concerns are being validated. The financial exposure alone raises questions about fiscal responsibility. More concerning, Helena continues, advancing to the next slide, are the partnership protocols that have developed around this agreement. Normal corporate policy requires legal review and board approval for international partnerships that involve this level of institutional commitment. The slide displays a timeline showing Minjun's meetings with Carmen, each interaction labeled as unilateral decision-making and departure from established protocols. The visual narrative suggests reckless abandonment of corporate governance rather than effective leadership. Young-suk examines the timeline with the analytical precision of someone who built a business empire through careful attention to detail. Minjun, were these meetings conducted with appropriate legal consultation? They were conducted with appropriate diplomatic consultation, Mother. The cultural agreement requires cultural competency, not just legal compliance. Cultural competency provided by a foreign diplomat whose qualifications and motivations remain questionable, Helena interjects, advancing to her most damaging evidence. The next series of slides displays Carmen's background investigation, her parents' death in Somalia, her language training in Los Angeles, her previous diplomatic assignments, and her connections to Korean American communities. But Helena's presentation reframes each qualification as potential security risk. Dr. Whitfield's exceptional Korean language skills and cultural knowledge raise questions about her preparation for this assignment. Such comprehensive cultural competency typically requires years of specialized training that exceeds normal diplomatic preparation. You're suggesting she's overqualified for cultural diplomacy? Minjun asks, his voice carrying dangerous quiet. I'm suggesting her qualifications pattern suggests purposes beyond cultural diplomacy. Combined with her extensive network of Korean connections and her parents' background in intelligence-adjacent diplomatic roles, her involvement raises legitimate security questions. The accusation hangs in the boardroom air like smoke from a fired weapon. Helena is suggesting that Carmen represents American intelligence interests disguised as cultural exchange, making Minjun's partnership not just professionally naive, but potentially treasonous. Young-suk leans forward with the focused attention of someone processing threatening information. Helena, are you saying this American diplomat poses a national security risk? I'm saying her background and behavior pattern warrant careful examination before we commit institutional resources to partnerships that could compromise Korean cultural sovereignty. Minjun realizes that Helena has elevated the stakes beyond corporate politics. She's suggesting that supporting Carmen makes him complicit in potential cultural espionage. The accusation is designed to destroy not just their professional partnership, but his standing as a Korean business leader. Helena, these accusations require evidence, not speculation. The evidence is Dr. Whitfield's own behavior. Her aggressive pursuit of this particular cultural agreement, her exceptional preparation for Korean negotiations, her immediate trust building with Korean institutions. It suggests advanced intelligence gathering that exceeds normal diplomatic preparation. The boardroom falls silent as members process the implications. Minjun recognizes that Helena has constructed a narrative that transforms Carmen's competence into evidence of ulterior motives, her cultural understanding into proof of suspicious preparation. But Young-suk's voice cuts through the speculation with the authority of someone who's navigated Korean politics for 4 decades. Helena, have you shared these concerns with appropriate government security agencies? I've made preliminary inquiries to determine whether formal investigation might be warranted. The admission changes everything. Helena hasn't just criticized Carmen's qualifications, she's initiated government scrutiny that could destroy both the cultural agreement and Carmen's diplomatic career. Minjun realizes that his attempt to defend Carmen might have triggered security investigations that neither of them can control. Mother, Minjun says, standing with the formal precision of someone making official statements. I request the opportunity to address these accusations directly. Young-suk nods, recognizing that her son's response will determine not just his corporate future but his family standing. Proceed. Dr. Whitfield's cultural competency isn't evidence of espionage. It's evidence of the exact preparation we should require from anyone involved in sensitive cultural negotiations. Her background investigation, which Helena has apparently conducted without authorization, reveals someone whose personal investment in cultural preservation aligns perfectly with institutional values. Personal investment that includes extensive emotional connections to Korean culture and Korean people, Helena counters. Connections that could compromise her objectivity regarding American versus Korean interests. Or connections that demonstrate genuine respect for cultural partnership rather than cultural extraction. Minjun moves to Helena's presentation display and advances to a slide she hasn't shown yet. Financial records indicating the cultural agreement's long-term value to Korean cultural institutions. The board should also review the complete financial analysis, not just the cost projections Helena has presented. The cultural agreement generates international prestige, diplomatic goodwill, and institutional relationships that benefit Korean cultural authority worldwide. Director Kim examines the hidden financial data with growing interest. These projections suggest significant intangible value that wasn't included in Helena's analysis. Because intangible value doesn't appear on quarterly reports, Minjun replies, but it builds the kind of international reputation that attracts cultural partnerships, academic collaborations, and diplomatic opportunities that serve Korean interests for decades. Young-suk studies her son's presentation with the calculating expression of someone weighing business prospects against political risks. Minjun, assuming Dr. Whitfield's motivations are genuine, can you guarantee that this partnership serves Korean interests rather than American interests? I can guarantee that cultural preservation serves human interests that transcend national boundaries. The artifacts we're discussing represent pre-Columbian American heritage being shared with Korean cultural institutions. This isn't zero-sum competition. It's collaborative preservation. Helena realizes that Minjun's response is shifting the board's focus from security paranoia to cultural opportunity. The question isn't whether cultural preservation serves abstract human interests. The question is whether this specific partnership serves Korean institutional interests, or whether it serves American diplomatic objectives that happen to benefit Dr. Whitfield's career advancement. The accusation strikes at the heart of Minjun's defense, whether his support for Carmen represents institutional judgment or personal compromise. Around the boardroom table, members wait for his response to the most dangerous question Helena has raised. Minjun looks directly at his mother, understanding that his next words will define his leadership, and possibly his relationship with the family business. The cultural agreement serves Korean interests because cultural authority is built through cultural generosity. By partnering with American institutions that respect Korean cultural competency, we demonstrate that Korean approaches to cultural preservation offer global value, even if that partnership compromises your objectivity regarding Dr. Whitfield's qualifications, Helena presses. My objectivity regarding Dr. Whitfield is based on professional results, not personal feelings. She's negotiated more successfully with Korean cultural institutions than any American diplomat in recent memory because she approaches cultural exchange as partnership rather than transaction. Young-suk raises her hand, silencing further debate. Minjun, I have one question that will determine my position on this matter. If Dr. Whitfield were replaced with another American diplomat tomorrow, would you continue supporting the cultural agreement with equal enthusiasm? The question cuts to the heart of Helena's accusations. Minjun realizes that any hesitation in his answer will validate the suggestion that his judgment has been compromised by personal attachment. Mother, I would support the cultural agreement regardless of American diplomatic personnel, because the principle of cultural preservation transcends individual relationships. But I would not support replacing Dr. Whitfield, because replacing competent diplomats with political appointees serves no institutional purpose except satisfying xenophobic paranoia. Helena's mask of professional courtesy finally slips completely. Minjun, your willingness to risk corporate reputation for personal loyalty is exactly the kind of leadership this company needs, Young-suk interrupts. Helena, I've heard enough accusations. What I haven't heard is constructive solutions that serve both Korean interests and corporate responsibility. The shift in Young-suk's tone catches Helena off guard. She's spent the meeting building a case for Minjun's removal, but the family matriarch is questioning her approach rather than accepting her conclusions. Eomeonim, with respect, the security concerns regarding Dr. Whitfield require evidence, not speculation. and the corporate concerns require balancing cultural value against financial cost, not eliminating cultural investment entirely. Young-suk's voice carries final authority. This board will vote on 3 separate motions: confidence in Min-jun's leadership, continuation of the cultural agreement, and Helena's fitness for her current advisory role. The last motion hits like a thunderbolt. Young-suk isn't just rejecting Helena's accusations. She's turning the weapons Helena used against Min-jun back on Helena herself. The vote will be conducted by secret ballot in 15 minutes. Board members will consider whether loyalty to institutional values requires supporting leadership that takes calculated risks for cultural advancement, or whether risk aversion should override opportunities for international cultural authority. As the board prepares for voting, Min-jun realizes that his mother has transformed Helena's coup attempt into a referendum on corporate vision. The cultural agreement has become secondary to larger questions about whether the Che Group will embrace international cultural leadership or retreat into conservative protectionism. But Helena isn't finished. As the ballots are distributed, she makes one final play that will determine whether the partnership between Min-jun and Carmen survives the morning. Before the vote, board members should know that Dr. Whitfield's transparency proposal includes public disclosure of all meeting records, financial arrangements, and personal communications related to the cultural agreement. That level of scrutiny will expose every board member's involvement in these decisions to international media attention. The threat lands with surgical precision. Helena is suggesting that supporting Min-jun means accepting personal exposure to the same media scrutiny that could destroy careers and reputations. It's a final gambit designed to make supporting the cultural agreement too personally dangerous for board members to risk. Young-suk looks at her son with something that might be pride. Min-jun, are you prepared for that level of transparency regarding your partnership with Dr. Whitfield? Completely prepared, Mother. Transparency protects people with nothing to hide. The ballots are cast in silence, each board member weighing personal risk against institutional opportunity. Min-jun realizes that the vote will determine not just his corporate future, but whether Korean cultural institutions will embrace international partnership or retreat into cultural isolationism. But as the votes are counted, no one in the boardroom realizes that Carmen is simultaneously facing her own crisis 3 miles away at the American consulate. A crisis that will test whether their partnership can survive attacks from both sides of the cultural divide they're trying to bridge. The American consulate's conference room has been converted into a war room, complete with secure communication links to Washington, legal documents spread across mahogany surfaces like battle plans, and the kind of tense atmosphere that precedes career-ending decisions. Carmen sits at the head of the table wearing her most formal diplomatic attire. Navy blazer, American flag pin positioned with military precision, and the composed expression of someone who's learned to mask fury behind professional courtesy. Ambassador Hayes paces behind her chair with the restless energy of someone whose diplomatic career depends on managing an international incident that's spiraled beyond normal damage control protocols. On the table between them lies a manila folder containing intelligence reports, media analyses, and legal opinions that could end Carmen's diplomatic service permanently. The timing is suspicious, Hayes says, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years navigating international crises. Helena Park's accusations surfaced the same morning that Korean intelligence services receive anonymous tips about American cultural espionage. That's not coincidence. That's coordinated warfare. Carmen studies the intelligence summary with the analytical precision that served her through diplomatic negotiations from Bogota to Brussels. They're using our transparency proposal against us. Every meeting with Min-jun, every cultural consultation, every demonstration of Korean language competence, it's all being reframed as evidence of suspicious preparation. More than reframed. These reports suggest that your parents' deaths in Somalia were connected to intelligence-gathering operations, not humanitarian work. They're questioning whether your entire diplomatic career has been a cover for cultural espionage. The accusation strikes at Carmen's deepest vulnerability, the memory of parents who died protecting human heritage from political destruction. She realizes that Helena's network has weaponized her personal tragedy, transforming her motivation for cultural preservation into evidence of ulterior motives. Sir, my parents were killed protecting museum artifacts from militia groups who wanted to sell cultural heritage on the black market. Their deaths taught me that cultural preservation requires personal sacrifice, not that cultural diplomacy serves intelligence objectives. I believe you. But belief isn't evidence, and Korean intelligence services are requesting formal investigation of American cultural diplomacy activities. If Washington decides that protecting you isn't worth risking broader diplomatic relationships, Hayes trails off, leaving the implication hanging like smoke. Carmen understands the calculation he's describing. Diplomatic careers are expendable when they threaten larger strategic interests. If Korean intelligence services demand her removal as the price of continued cooperation, Washington might decide that one cultural attaché isn't worth risking security partnerships that serve broader American interests. What's the timeline? 12 hours. Washington wants Korean concerns addressed before the media attention spreads to other international cultural agreements. If we can't provide convincing evidence that your partnership with Min serves American interests, rather than compromising them, they'll recall me and terminate the cultural agreement. They'll recall you and probably terminate your diplomatic career entirely. Cultural espionage accusations don't disappear from personnel files, Carmen. Even if the charges are eventually proven false, the suspicion follows diplomats through every subsequent assignment. Carmen realizes that Helena's strategy extends beyond destroying the cultural agreement. She's attempting to end Carmen's diplomatic career as a warning to other American diplomats who might consider challenging Korean institutional authority. The personal has become political in the most dangerous way possible. The secure phone on Hayes' desk rings with the electronic tone that signals urgent communication from Washington. He answers with the formal precision of someone who's learned that international phone calls can end careers. Ambassador Hayes? Yes, I understand. She's here now. I see. How long do we have? Carmen watches his expression shift from concern to something approaching alarm. The conversation lasts less than 3 minutes, but she knows from diplomatic experience that the briefest calls often carry the most devastating news. Hayes hangs up and turns to her with the careful neutrality of someone delivering a professional death sentence. That was Deputy Secretary Morrison. Korean intelligence services have escalated their concerns to the ministry level. They're requesting your immediate recall pending formal investigation of cultural espionage allegations. And Washington's response? Washington is prepared to comply with Korean requests if we can't provide evidence that your partnership with Min produces results that justify the political risk. Carmen realizes that her diplomatic career now depends on proving that the cultural agreement serves American interests convincingly enough to outweigh Korean security concerns. It's an impossible standard. Cultural diplomacy rarely produces quantifiable results quickly enough to satisfy political timelines. Sir, cultural agreements take years to demonstrate their full value. International partnerships, academic collaborations, diplomatic goodwill. These benefits accumulate over decades, not quarters. Tell that to politicians who measure diplomatic success in media cycles and election calendars. Hayes sits across from her with the weary expression of someone who's watched idealistic diplomats learn harsh political realities. Carmen, I need you to understand something. If Washington recalls you under these circumstances, no other country will risk accepting you as cultural attaché. Your diplomatic career will be over. The words land with the force of professional death. Carmen realizes that Helena's accusations don't just threaten the cultural agreement. They threaten to destroy everything she's built since her parents' deaths 15 years ago. But before she can respond, her personal phone buzzes with an urgent message from an unknown Korean number. Board vote successful. Partnership approved. Can we meet? Min. The message arrives like light breaking through storm clouds. Min-jun's partnership has survived Helena's corporate coup, which means the cultural agreement might still be salvageable if they can move quickly enough to demonstrate results before Washington makes irreversible decisions. Ambassador, I need 12 hours. Carmen, you don't have 12 hours. Morrison wants a response within 6 hours, and Korean intelligence will get their response. But it won't be surrender. Carmen stands with the decisive energy of someone who's decided to risk everything on a single strategic gamble. I'm going to give them transparency so complete that continued accusations become politically embarrassing. What are you proposing? Public presentation of the complete cultural agreement. Every document, every meeting record, every financial arrangement, every cultural consultation. We make the entire partnership so transparent that questioning its legitimacy requires questioning the legitimacy of cultural diplomacy itself. Hayes stares at her as if she's suggested conducting diplomatic negotiations on live television. Carmen, that level of transparency would expose diplomatic methods, Korean institutional dynamics, and American cultural intelligence that both governments prefer to keep confidential. Then let's make transparency serve both governments' interests. Present the cultural agreement as a model for international cultural cooperation that demonstrates American respect for Korean cultural authority while serving Korean interests in global cultural leadership. And if the transparency reveals information that either government finds embarrassing? Carmen realizes that her proposal carries risks that extend beyond her personal career. She's suggesting to revolutionize cultural diplomacy by eliminating the privacy that usually protects international negotiations. But she also understands that conventional diplomatic protection won't save her from accusations designed to destroy unconventional partnerships. Then we handle embarrassment honestly and demonstrate that diplomatic relationships can survive transparency better than they can survive suspicion. Hayes is quiet for a long moment, weighing political risks against diplomatic opportunities. Carmen, if this approach fails, it won't just end your career. It could damage American cultural diplomacy worldwide by creating precedents that other countries exploit to demand inappropriate transparency from future diplomatic operations. And if this approach succeeds, it creates precedents that protect future diplomatic operations from politically motivated accusations. Sir, Helena Park's strategy only works if cultural diplomacy operates in shadows where competence can be reframed as espionage. Transparency eliminates those shadows. The secure phone rings again, but this time Carmen answers before Hayes can reach it. Dr. Whitfield speaking. Yes, I understand the urgency. Actually, I have a counter-proposal that addresses Korean concerns while serving American interests. Can you give me 2 hours to prepare a presentation? She hangs up and turns to Hayes with the determined expression of someone who's decided to bet her career on a strategy that either saves everything or destroys it completely. That was Deputy Secretary Morrison's office. I've requested a secure video conference with Korean intelligence officials, Washington policymakers, and Min Jun as the Korean cultural partner. We're going to present the complete cultural agreement as a transparency model that serves both governments' interests. Carmen, that's incredibly risky. If the presentation fails to convince either government, then I'll accept diplomatic recall and career termination. But if it succeeds, we'll have created a new model for cultural diplomacy that protects future partnerships from politically motivated attacks. As Carmen prepares for the most important presentation of her diplomatic career, she realizes that the partnership with Min Jun has evolved beyond professional collaboration into something that represents fundamental questions about international cultural cooperation. Their success or failure will determine whether cultural diplomacy can survive in an age when cultural exchange is weaponized as easily as celebrated. But she also knows that somewhere across Seoul, Min Jun is facing his own moment of truth, whether to support a partnership that could cost him everything he's built, or retreat to the safety of traditional Korean business practices that protect institutional power by avoiding international risk. The Namsan Foundation School sits hidden in Seoul's Yongsan district like a secret garden behind industrial facades, a converted warehouse that houses 43 refugee children whose education exists in the spaces between Korean institutional recognition and international humanitarian law. Carmen arrives at the address Min Jun texted her with the uncertainty of someone following coordinates into unknown territory. The afternoon sunlight filters through industrial windows onto classroom walls decorated with children's artwork that tells stories in languages Korean society pretends not to hear. Arabic poetry about lost homes, Dari sketches of families left behind, Tamil drawings of sea voyages that ended in refugee camps rather than promised lands. Min Jun stands at the front of a mathematics classroom, his expensive suit looking absurdly formal as he helps a 12-year-old North Korean girl work through algebra problems. His Korean carries gentle patience rather than corporate authority, and Carmen realizes she's witnessing the person he becomes when no one is measuring his performance against quarterly profit reports. Dr. Whitfield, says a woman's voice behind her. Carmen turns to meet Sung Mi-kyung, the school's director, whose worn cardigan and tired eyes suggest someone who's learned to operate educational miracles on humanitarian budgets. Min Jun told us you might visit. Welcome to the school that doesn't officially exist. Carmen follows Mi-kyung through hallways that buzz with the multilingual energy of children, adapting to new worlds faster than adults can create systems to support them. In one classroom, teenage Syrian refugees learn Korean grammar alongside Myanmar nationals whose parents fled military conscription. In another, Eritrean children practice English pronunciation with Afghan siblings who've never seen their father outside a detention facility. "How long has Min-jun been funding this?" Carmen asks, watching him demonstrate geometric concepts using hand gestures that transcend language barriers. 3 years. Ever since the government changed asylum policies and 43 children lost their legal right to education. Mi-kyung's voice carries the matter-of-fact tone of someone who's learned to discuss crises as operational challenges. Official refugee schools require documentation that these children can't provide. Private schools require fees their families can't afford. So they exist in educational limbo unless someone creates alternatives. Carmen realizes she's discovering the side of Min-jun that Helena's accusations couldn't touch. Genuine humanitarian commitment that serves no corporate interests and generates no public relations benefits. These children don't appear in Che Group annual reports or shareholder presentations, which makes Min-jun's investment in their future purely personal. Does the board know about this funding? Officially, the Namsan Foundation receives corporate charitable donations from various sources. Unofficially, Mi-kyung smiles with the subtle subversion of someone who's learned to protect vulnerable programs from political interference. Min-jun learned early that some philanthropy requires strategic invisibility. The mathematics lesson ends with the North Korean girl successfully solving an equation that would challenge students twice her age. Min-jun's genuine pleasure at her success transforms his usually controlled expression into something approaching joy. The same expression Carmen glimpsed during their tea house conversation when corporate masks slip to reveal human connection. As children transition between classes with the easy multilingual chatter of people who've learned that survival requires linguistic flexibility, Min-jun approaches Carmen with something like vulnerability in his posture. "This isn't what you expected to see today," he says. "No, it's better." Carmen watches a group of teenagers help younger children with homework in 3 different languages simultaneously. "How did you find this place?" "I didn't find it. It found me." Min-jun leans against a classroom doorframe, his corporate confidence replaced by the careful honesty of someone sharing protected information. 2 years ago, a North Korean woman who cleaned our corporate offices brought her daughter to work because she had nowhere else to leave her. The girl was brilliant, spoke 4 languages, understood mathematical concepts that impressed our engineering staff, but she couldn't attend school because her family's refugee status was under review. Under review meaning indefinitely delayed? Under review meaning deliberately stalled by immigration policies designed to discourage refugee settlement. I started researching Korean refugee education and discovered that dozens of children were losing years of schooling while bureaucrats debated their legal existence. Carmen recognizes the passion in Min-jun's voice, the same intensity he brings to defending the cultural agreement, but directed toward humanitarian protection rather than diplomatic cooperation. She realizes that his commitment to the refugee school reveals the values driving his support for international cultural exchange. "So you created an alternative education system?" "I funded an alternative education system." Mi-kyung and her teachers created the miracle that turns abandoned warehouses into academies. Min-jun looks around the converted classroom with the pride of someone who's learned that meaningful investment requires trusting other people's expertise. These children represent the same principle as our cultural agreement. Human potential transcends political boundaries. The parallel hits Carmen with unexpected force. Min-jun's defense of the cultural agreement isn't just about institutional cooperation. It's about his belief that cultural barriers, like immigration barriers, should be bridges rather than walls. Helena doesn't know about this funding. Helena knows about corporate charitable contributions to various humanitarian organizations. She doesn't know about the specific organizations or the personal oversight I provide. Min-jun's expression hardens slightly. After today's board meeting, I suspect that will change. Carmen realizes that Helena's investigation of Min-jun will likely expose the refugee school funding, which could be reframed as either admirable philanthropy or questionable resource allocation, depending on the corporate narrative Helena chooses to construct. "Are you concerned about political exposure?" "I'm concerned about these children losing educational support because Korean politics treats refugee assistance as controversial rather than humanitarian. Min-jun watches teenagers help elementary students with language homework. Their easy multilingual collaboration, demonstrating integration possibilities that political rhetoric denies. If supporting refugee education becomes politically toxic, then Korean cultural values need examination, not refugee children. The statement carries the same moral clarity that Min-jun brought to defending Carmen against Helena's accusations. Carmen realizes that his partnership with her represents part of a larger pattern. Willingness to risk political safety for principles that transcend national self-interest. Their conversation is interrupted by commotion in the main hallway. Mi-kyung approaches with the controlled urgency of someone managing crisis without alarming children. Min-jun, we have visitors. 3 men in suits claiming to represent Korean education authorities. They want to inspect our undocumented educational activities. The timing feels too convenient to be coincidental. Carmen suspects that Helena's network has discovered the refugee school and chosen this moment, during the cultural agreement crisis, to create additional pressure on Min-jun's reputation. What do they want specifically? Min-jun asks, his voice shifting into executive mode. Documentation of student enrollment, proof of teacher certification, verification of curriculum compliance with Korean educational standards. Mi-kyung's ironic tone suggests she understands the impossibility of providing documentation for children whose legal existence remains under review by the same government agencies now demanding educational compliance. Carmen recognizes the trap being constructed. Min-jun will be forced to either expose the refugee school to regulatory scrutiny that could close it, or admit to operating educational programs outside Korean legal frameworks. Either choice providing Helena with evidence of irregular corporate behavior. Can I see these education authorities? Carmen asks. Min-jun looks at her with surprise. Carmen, you're already facing government scrutiny. Getting involved with this is exactly what cultural attachés are trained to handle. Education across international boundaries is cultural diplomacy, which makes refugee education partially within my professional purview. The explanation is technically accurate but strategically risky. Carmen is suggesting that her diplomatic authority extends to protecting educational programs that serve children from multiple countries, including North Korea, a claim that could either legitimize the refugee school or provide additional evidence for Helena's espionage accusations. But before Min-jun can object, Carmen is already walking toward the main hallway where 3 men in dark suits examine enrollment documents with the methodical attention of investigators building legal cases, rather than educational evaluators ensuring child welfare. Gentlemen, Carmen says in perfect Korean, her diplomat credentials prominently displayed. I'm Dr. Carmen Whitfield, cultural attaché with the American Consulate. I understand you're reviewing international educational cooperation programs. The lead investigator looks up from his documentation with the surprise of someone whose routine inspection has suddenly become diplomatically complicated. Dr. Whitfield, this is a domestic educational compliance matter, not an international cultural issue. Refugee education is inherently international, as these children represent cultural backgrounds from multiple countries seeking educational integration into Korean society. The Namsan Foundation's work directly relates to cultural preservation and international humanitarian cooperation. Carmen's reframing transforms the investigation from regulatory violation into diplomatic partnership. The education officials realize they're no longer dealing with a simple case of undocumented schooling, but with an international cultural program that has American diplomatic oversight. Are you saying the American consulate has official involvement with this school? The investigator asks carefully. I'm saying that refugee education represents the same principles of cultural bridge building that American and Korean institutions have been developing through various cultural exchange programs. The children here are learning Korean culture, Korean language, and Korean civic responsibility, which serves Korean integration interests as much as educational humanitarian interests. Min-jun watches Carmen's diplomatic maneuvering with something approaching awe. She's managed to recontextualize the refugee school as an extension of the cultural agreement, making official harassment of the children politically complicated for investigators who came prepared for routine regulatory enforcement. Dr. Whitfield, the investigator says slowly, will need to review the educational authority's jurisdiction regarding international cultural programs. This may require additional consultation. Of course. I'm happy to provide documentation of American Cultural Attaché Authority regarding international educational cooperation. The American consulate maintains active interest in any educational programs that serve cultural integration between Korea and international communities. As the investigators retreat to conduct jurisdictional research, Mi-kyung approaches Carmen with gratitude mixed with concern. Thank you for protecting the children, but won't this create complications for your cultural agreement? Probably, Carmen admits. But some complications are worth accepting. Min-jun realizes that Carmen has just escalated her diplomatic profile even further, making herself more visible to Korean authorities at the exact moment when visibility represents maximum professional risk. Her protection of the refugee school demonstrates the same principle over safety approach that's driving her support for their partnership. Carmen, you didn't have to involve yourself in this. Yes, I did. These children represent the same values as the cultural agreement, human potential that transcends political boundaries. If I can't defend those values when they're vulnerable, then I don't deserve to negotiate agreements based on them. As they watch refugee children continue their studies despite the morning's official interruption, Carmen and Min-jun realize that their partnership has evolved beyond cultural cooperation into shared commitment to principles that require personal risk. The refugee school represents Min-jun's private version of the public values Carmen negotiates through diplomacy. But their moment of mutual understanding is interrupted by Carmen's phone buzzing with an urgent message from Ambassador Hayes. Korean intelligence escalation confirmed. Video conference with Washington in 2 hours. Are you prepared for complete transparency? The refugee school visit has consumed the time Carmen needed to prepare for the most important presentation of her diplomatic career. She now faces the choice between thorough preparation for her professional defense or accepting the risk of improvised diplomacy that could end her career or revolutionize cultural exchange entirely. I have to go, she tells Min-jun. The video conference with Washington and Korean intelligence. I'll drive you, he says immediately. We're partners in this transparency, which means we prepare together or fail together. As they leave the Namsan Foundation School, Carmen realizes that the refugee children they're leaving behind represent the stakes involved in their diplomatic partnership. Success means creating precedents that protect international cultural cooperation. Failure means abandoning not just institutional agreements, but human dreams that depend on cultural bridges surviving political warfare. The most dangerous game in international diplomacy isn't between governments. It's between people who believe that human potential transcends political boundaries and those who profit from maintaining artificial barriers. Sometimes, winning that game requires risking everything you've built to protect everyone you serve. The Chosun Ilbo newspaper building towers over Yongu like a sentinel of Korean media power, its newsroom windows glowing with the fluorescent intensity of journalists pursuing stories that can destroy careers with the precision of surgical strikes. On the 15th floor, senior political reporter Kim Jae-sun reviews photographs that arrive through anonymous channels with the timing that suggests orchestrated revelation rather than accidental discovery. The images tell a story carefully constructed for maximum damage. Carmen and Min-jun sharing an intimate meal at Gayaon, their heads close together in conversation that appears personal rather than professional. Carmen's hand briefly touching Min-jun's as they share banchan. The moment at the refugee school when Min-jun's genuine smile transformed his corporate mask into human warmth, while Carmen watched with obvious admiration. Individually, each photograph documents professional collaboration. Collectively, they suggest romantic involvement that compromises both participants' judgment regarding the cultural agreement. Kim recognizes the editorial goldmine in his possession, a story that combines international intrigue, corporate scandal, and forbidden romance between powerful figures whose partnership has already generated political controversy. Park Sun-bae, Kim calls to his editor, using the honorific that acknowledges both respect and hierarchy. I have the follow-up story to yesterday's cultural espionage investigation. Park Jin-ho approaches with the predatory satisfaction of someone who's built a journalism career on exposing the personal failings of public figures. At 58, he's navigated Korean media long enough to understand that scandal sells newspapers better than policy analysis, and romance scandals involving foreign diplomats sell better than any other content. Show me what you have, Park says, settling behind Kim's computer monitor. The photographs load in sequence, each image building a narrative of professional boundaries dissolving into personal attachment. The visual story begins with formal diplomatic meetings and progresses to intimate conversations that suggest emotional investment beyond institutional requirements. Source? Park asks, though his tone suggests he already knows the answer involves Helena Park's network of corporate connections. Anonymous. But the metadata confirms the images are authentic and recent. The final photograph was taken yesterday afternoon at the Namsan Foundation School. Park examines the refugee school image with particular interest. Min-jun and Carmen working together to protect children. Their synchronized response to official investigation, suggesting partnership that operates beyond normal diplomatic cooperation. Context for the refugee school involvement? Che Group provides undisclosed funding for refugee education outside official Korean immigration channels. Dr. Whitfield intervened when education authorities investigated the program, claiming American diplomatic authority over international educational cooperation. The additional information transforms the story from simple romance scandal to complex narrative involving unauthorized immigration assistance, questionable corporate philanthropy, and American diplomatic overreach in Korean domestic affairs. Angle? American diplomat uses romantic relationship with Korean CEO to influence domestic refugee policy while circumventing established immigration procedures. Corporate leader compromises shareholder interest for personal relationship with foreign government representative. Park nods with the satisfaction of someone who's discovered a scandal that serves multiple editorial purposes, undermining Korean institutional confidence in American cultural diplomacy, questioning Chaebol leadership accountability, and providing salacious content that will drive reader engagement for weeks. Legal review? Completed. We can publish the photographs and documented facts without libel risk, provided we avoid explicit romantic allegations. Implication through visual evidence and circumstantial behavior pattern is legally protected journalism. The Chosun Ilbo's editorial decision crystallizes around the newsroom's understanding that this story represents more than scandal. It represents the opportunity to shape public opinion regarding Korea's relationship with American cultural institutions and the appropriate boundaries of international cooperation. Publication timeline? Online edition in 2 hours, coordinated with morning print edition. Maximum impact during business hours when both American and Korean officials will be monitoring media coverage. As the newsroom prepares for publication, neither Kim nor Park realizes that their story will arrive at the exact moment when Carmen and Min-jun are presenting their transparency defense to Korean intelligence and Washington policymakers. The scandal revelation is timed to undermine their credibility during the most critical presentation of their partnership. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away in the Lotte World Tower, Helena Park reviews the same photographs on her private laptop with the satisfaction of someone whose strategic planning has reached perfect execution. She's coordinated the media revelation to coincide with the diplomatic crisis, ensuring that Carmen and Min-jun will face both professional accusations and personal scandal simultaneously. Soo-jin enters Helena's office with the urgent deference of someone delivering information that could change corporate dynamics permanently. Helena Sunbae, the Chosun Ilbo, is preparing publication. They've requested official company response to allegations of inappropriate corporate resource allocation. Helena's smile could freeze water. What allegations specifically? Undisclosed charitable funding that exceeds normal corporate philanthropy parameters. Suggestions that Min-jun's judgment regarding the cultural agreement has been compromised by personal considerations. The corporate euphemisms mask the devastating reality. Helena has successfully connected Min-jun's refugee school funding with his defense of Carmen, creating a narrative of compromised leadership that threatens both his corporate position and personal reputation. Prepare a statement emphasizing the board's commitment to transparency and accountability in corporate resource allocation. Suggest that any personal relationships between executives and foreign partners undergo appropriate oversight to ensure institutional interests remain paramount. Soo-jin recognizes the corporate knife being sharpened for Min-jun's professional destruction. Helena's statement will position the board as protecting company interests from leadership whose judgment has been corrupted by inappropriate foreign influence. Should I inform Min-jun Sunbaenim about the media inquiry? That won't be necessary. He'll discover the publication through normal media monitoring. Our responsibility is ensuring corporate preparedness for public scrutiny, not managing individual executives' personal complications. The dismissal contains malice disguised as professional protocol. Helena is ensuring that Min-jun will face media scandal without advance warning, maximizing the damage to his reputation and his ability to respond effectively. As Helena finalizes her corporate response strategy, her phone rings with the private number that connects her directly to Director Kim at the Korean Arts Council. The timing is perfect. Media scandal and institutional pressure combining to destroy the partnership that threatens her corporate authority. Director Kim, I assume you've heard about tomorrow's Chosun Ilbo story? I've been informed about photographic evidence suggesting inappropriate personal relationships affecting the cultural agreement negotiations. The timing is convenient, given today's intelligence concerns about Dr. Whitfield's background. Helena recognizes Kim's careful political language. They're both acknowledging their coordination without explicitly admitting to orchestrated destruction of diplomatic and corporate reputations. The board will be reviewing Min-jun's fitness for leadership, given evidence of compromised judgment regarding foreign partnerships. The cultural agreement may require re-evaluation if American diplomatic credibility remains questionable. The Arts Council will certainly consider whether partnership with American institutions serves Korean cultural interests, especially if those partnerships involve inappropriate personal considerations that compromise professional objectivity. The conversation establishes coordinated institutional response designed to destroy both the cultural agreement and the personal partnership that supports it. Helena's strategy has evolved from corporate coup attempt to systematic destruction of everyone who challenges her authority. But as Helena concludes her strategic coordination, she doesn't realize that Soo-jin has been documenting her conversations with the meticulous attention of someone who understands that loyalty sometimes requires protecting people from their own moral blindness. The evidence Soo-jin has been gathering will soon become crucial to determining whether Helena's warfare can be survived or whether it will destroy everyone in its path. Across Seoul, Carmen and Min-jun prepare for their transparency presentation to Korean intelligence and Washington policymakers, unaware that their personal relationship has become public scandal designed to undermine their professional credibility. In 2 hours, they'll discover whether transparency can protect them from attacks that target both their partnership and their individual reputations. The most dangerous game in international diplomacy has evolved from institutional conflict to personal warfare, where professional competence becomes evidence of corruption and human connection becomes proof of betrayal. Success requires surviving attacks that use personal relationships as weapons while maintaining the trust that makes partnerships worth protecting. The cultural agreement has become secondary to the larger question of whether authentic human collaboration can survive political systems designed to reward isolation over integration, suspicion over cooperation, and personal destruction over professional success. Sometimes, winning requires accepting that some battles must be fought publicly, regardless of the cost to privacy and professional safety. The secure video conference room in the American consulate resembles a high-tech bunker designed for diplomatic warfare, its walls lined with encrypted communication equipment, multiple screens displaying participants from Washington and Seoul, and the kind of austere functionality that makes international crisis management feel like military operations. Carmen sits at the central conference table, wearing her most formal diplomatic attire, her American flag pin positioned with precision that signals both authority and vulnerability. Min-jun occupies the chair beside her with the controlled tension of someone whose corporate survival depends on convincing government officials that partnership serves national interests rather than personal ones. His charcoal gray suit and platinum watch project power, but Carmen notices the slight tremor in his hands that reveals stress beneath executive composure. On the primary screen, Deputy Secretary Morrison's image appears with the bureaucratic gravitas of someone whose decisions shape American foreign policy for decades. His expression carries the careful neutrality of diplomats who've learned to deliver career-ending verdicts with professional courtesy. Dr. Whitfield, Mr. Che, Morrison begins, his voice carrying across encrypted channels with digital clarity. Thank you for arranging this emergency consultation. The concerns raised by Korean intelligence services require immediate resolution. The secondary screen displays Director Kim from the Korean Arts Council, alongside 2 Korean intelligence officials whose presence transforms cultural discussion into security investigation. Their stone-faced attention suggests people prepared to judge American diplomatic activities as potential espionage rather than cultural cooperation. Before we begin, Carmen says, her voice steady despite career-defining stakes. I want to establish the transparency framework that will govern this presentation. Every document, meeting record, and cultural consultation related to the cultural agreement will be available for review by all participants. Morrison's eyebrows raised slightly. Unprecedented transparency in diplomatic negotiations typically signals either complete innocence or catastrophic desperation. Dr. Whitfield, that level of disclosure exceeds normal diplomatic protocols. Normal diplomatic protocols haven't been accused of cultural espionage by allied governments. Carmen replies. Extraordinary accusations require extraordinary transparency. Min Jun activates his laptop, displaying financial records that show the Che Group's complete investment in the cultural agreement. The Korean participants in this partnership are prepared for identical transparency. Every corporate expenditure, board meeting record, and institutional consultation is available for examination. The decision to eliminate diplomatic privacy catches both Washington and Korean officials off guard. Transparent diplomacy typically serves political performance rather than genuine negotiation, but Carmen and Min Jun are proposing authentic transparency that could expose embarrassing information to protect against espionage accusations. Dr. Whitfield, says Korean intelligence officer Lee Sang-woo, his voice carrying official authority, transparency regarding procedures doesn't address concerns about motivations. Your exceptional preparation for Korean cultural negotiations raises questions that documentation alone cannot resolve. The accusation strikes at the heart of Helena's narrative. Carmen's competence becomes evidence of suspicious preparation rather than professional excellence. She realizes that transparency can protect against procedural accusations, but cannot defend against motivational suspicion. Officer Lee, my preparation for Korean cultural negotiations reflects the same thoroughness I brought to cultural diplomacy in Colombia, Honduras, and Belgium. The difference is that Korean culture demanded deeper linguistic and cultural competency than European negotiations required. Yet your Korean language skills exceed those of most foreign diplomats assigned to Seoul. Such exceptional preparation suggests advanced planning that extends beyond normal diplomatic assignment requirements. Carmen recognizes the logical trap. Professional excellence becomes evidence of ulterior motives when viewed through the lens of suspicion rather than competence evaluation. Any evidence she provides to demonstrate legitimate preparation will be reinterpreted as proof of sophisticated intelligence gathering. Min Jun intervenes with the corporate authority that served him through hostile takeover attempts and shareholder rebellions. Officer Lee, Dr. Whitfield's cultural competency represents exactly the preparation we should require from international partners. Questioning competence as evidence of deception discourages the very qualifications that make cultural cooperation successful. Mr. Che, your defense of Dr. Whitfield may itself be compromised by considerations beyond institutional judgment. Director Kim interjects, producing a tablet displaying photographs from the morning's Chosun Ilbo publication. The images appear on the conference screens with devastating clarity. Carmen and Min Jun sharing intimate conversation at Gayaon, their body language suggesting personal connection that transcends professional necessity. The moment at the refugee school when mutual understanding passed between them like recognition of shared values. The synchronized response to education authorities that demonstrated partnership beyond normal diplomatic cooperation. Morrison examines the photographs with the analytical precision of someone who's learned to read political implications in personal interactions. Dr. Whitfield, these images suggest relationship dynamics that could compromise professional objectivity regarding the cultural agreement. Carmen feels her diplomatic career collapsing around the visual evidence of human connection that Korean media has weaponized into professional scandal. But instead of defensive denial, she chooses radical honesty that could either save or destroy her completely. Deputy Secretary Morrison, those photographs document exactly what they appear to document: professional partnership that has developed personal respect and mutual trust. If that level of human connection disqualifies diplomatic cooperation, then American cultural diplomacy needs reevaluation, not American diplomats. The admission shocks everyone in the video conference. Carmen has acknowledged personal feelings while maintaining that such feelings serve rather than compromise professional judgment. It's either brilliant strategic honesty or career-ending transparency. Min-jun follows her lead with corporate courage that risks everything he's built. The photographs show two people who have learned to trust each other enough to defend shared principles against political attacks. That trust has made our partnership more effective, not less reliable. Korean intelligence officer Lee leans forward with prosecutorial intensity. Mr. Che, are you acknowledging that personal considerations influence your professional support for the cultural agreement? I'm acknowledging that understanding someone's character makes professional collaboration more effective. Dr. Whitfield's integrity and competence earned my trust, which made defending the cultural agreement against political attacks a matter of institutional principle rather than personal convenience. The answer reframes personal connection as professional asset, rather than compromising liability. Min-jun is suggesting that trust enhances, rather than undermines diplomatic effectiveness, challenging the assumption that emotional distance serves institutional interests. Morrison processes the implications of their radical transparency strategy. Dr. Whitfield, Mr. Che, are you arguing that personal trust between negotiating partners serves diplomatic, rather than compromises diplomatic objectives? I'm arguing that cultural diplomacy requires cultural understanding, which develops through personal connection with cultural partners, Carmen responds. Reducing international cooperation to purely transactional relationships eliminates the human element that makes cultural exchange meaningful. The philosophical defense challenges fundamental assumptions about diplomatic professionalism. Carmen and Min-jun are suggesting that authentic partnership, including personal trust and mutual respect, serves institutional interests better than emotionally sterile transactions. But their argument is interrupted by Officer Lee producing additional evidence from Helena's network. Corporate financial records suggesting irregular charitable expenditures, documentation of Min-jun's refugee school funding outside official Korean immigration channels, and communications between Helena and Korean security services that reveal coordinated investigation of American cultural activities. Mr. Che, these records suggest corporate resource allocation that exceeds normal philanthropic parameters while supporting activities outside established Korean immigration protocols. Such activities raise questions about institutional oversight and appropriate use of corporate authority. Carmen realizes that Helena's strategy extends beyond personal scandal to systematic destruction of Min-jun's corporate reputation and refugee assistance program. The attack is designed to force him to choose between protecting himself and protecting vulnerable children. Officer Lee, Min-jun says quietly, his voice carrying final authority, those records document corporate social responsibility that serves Korean humanitarian interests. The Namsan Foundation School provides education to refugee children whose legal limbo prevents access to standard Korean educational institutions. Supporting their education serves Korean integration policies rather than undermining Korean immigration authority. Yet, that support operates outside established immigration protocols and without appropriate government oversight. Director Kim objects. Carmen recognizes the moment when transparency becomes strategic offense rather than defensive protection. Director Kim, if Korean immigration protocols create educational gaps that require private humanitarian responses, perhaps the protocols need examination rather than the humanitarian assistance. The challenge shifts focus from defending their partnership to questioning the institutional systems that make refugee assistance necessary. Carmen and Min-jun are suggesting that their collaboration reveals institutional failures rather than personal corruption. Morrison realizes that the video conference has evolved beyond investigating individual diplomats into examining the effectiveness of international cooperation frameworks. Dr. Whitfield, are you suggesting that American cultural diplomacy should challenge Korean domestic policy decisions? I'm suggesting that cultural diplomacy should serve human welfare rather than political convenience. When immigration policies create humanitarian crises that require private intervention, cultural partners have responsibility to address those crises collaboratively. The argument transforms the video conference from accusations of espionage into debate about the moral obligations of international cooperation. Carmen and Min-jun have successfully reframed their partnership as serving humanitarian principles that both governments claim to support. But Officer Lee isn't finished with his prosecutorial offensive. Dr. Whitfield, your intervention in Korean Education Authority investigations exceeded your diplomatic authority. American cultural attachés don't have jurisdiction over Korean immigration enforcement. American cultural attachés have jurisdiction over international educational cooperation that involves American institutional partners. Carmen replies. The Namsan Foundation School serves children from multiple countries, making educational support a legitimate concern for cultural diplomacy focused on international educational collaboration. The legal technicality provides cover for Carmen's refugee school intervention, but Officer Lee produces additional evidence designed to destroy that defense. Recordings of Carmen's conversations with education authorities that demonstrate detailed knowledge of Korean immigration law, rather than general cultural cooperation principles. These recordings suggest preparation that exceeds normal cultural attaché training. Your detailed understanding of Korean immigration procedures, refugee legal status, and educational authority jurisdictions indicates specialized knowledge that supports concerns about intelligence gathering objectives. Carmen realizes that every demonstration of competence becomes evidence of suspicious preparation in Officer Lee's investigative framework. Her diplomatic expertise is being weaponized as proof of espionage rather than evidence of professional excellence. But Min-jun intervenes with information that completely changes the video conference dynamics. Officer Lee, before you continue building espionage theories around professional competence, you should review the complete record of Helena Park's coordination with Korean intelligence services. Min-jun activates his laptop, displaying email correspondence between Helena and security officials that reveals the orchestrated campaign against Carmen and the cultural agreement. The documentation shows Helena providing American diplomatic intelligence to Korean authorities, while coordinating media attacks designed to destroy international cooperation. These communications demonstrate that Dr. Whitfield isn't involved in American espionage against Korean institutions. She's been targeted by Korean corporate interests using government security services to eliminate international partnerships that threaten established power structures. The revelation transforms the entire video conference. Morrison and the Korean officials realize they've been manipulated into investigating diplomatic cooperation by corporate interests that profit from maintaining international isolation rather than encouraging cultural collaboration. Mr. Che, Officer Lee says carefully, are you alleging that Helena Park used Korean intelligence services to target American diplomatic personnel? I'm providing documented evidence that Helena Park coordinated with security officials to destroy the cultural agreement by manufacturing espionage accusations against competent American diplomats whose partnership threatened her corporate authority. The evidence is devastating. Helena's communications reveal systematic manipulation of security concerns to serve corporate political objectives, transforming legitimate intelligence oversight into weapons for destroying international cooperation. Morrison's expression shifts from bureaucratic neutrality to righteous fury. Officer Lee, if Korean intelligence services were manipulated by private interests to target American diplomatic personnel, this represents a serious breach of intelligence cooperation protocols. The video conference has been completely transformed. Instead of investigating Carmen and Min-jun for espionage, both governments now face questions about how corporate interests manipulated security services to destroy legitimate diplomatic partnerships. But the victory comes with dangerous implications. Exposing Helena's manipulation means declaring war against the network of corporate and political interests she represents. The cultural agreement might survive, but Carmen and Min-jun have made enemies who prefer destroying careers to accepting defeat. As the video conference concludes with both governments promising investigation of Helena's network rather than Carmen's competence, Morrison delivers the ultimate diplomatic validation. Dr. Whitfield, your transparency during this crisis represents the highest standards of American cultural diplomacy. The partnership with Mr. Che will serve as a model for future international cultural cooperation. The words save Carmen's career while establishing precedent that protects future diplomatic partnerships from politically motivated attacks. But as she and Min-jun celebrate their professional survival, neither realizes that Helena's final gambit is already in motion, a strategy designed to destroy what investigations and accusations couldn't touch: their personal trust in each other. The most dangerous game in international diplomacy has evolved from professional warfare to personal destruction, where victory requires surviving attacks that target the human connections making partnership possible. Sometimes, Transparency isn't enough protection against enemies who understand that destroying trust destroys everything built upon it. To be continued. Carmen and Minjun have survived the diplomatic warfare and exposed Helena's network of lies, but their victory comes with a terrifying promise. Helena's final gambit is already in motion, a strategy designed to destroy the personal trust that makes their professional partnership possible, through methods that will test whether their relationship can survive the kind of intimate betrayal that turns allies into enemies with surgical precision. What happens next will break your heart and heal it again. The most dangerous battle isn't over. It's just beginning. When the attacks shift from professional sabotage to personal destruction, will Carmen and Minjun's partnership survive? Can love built on trust withstand betrayal designed to tear them apart from within? Part 2 is coming soon with Minjun's corporate crisis and emotional breakdown, the truth about Helena's final revenge, Carmen's heartbreaking departure to Washington, the impossible choice between career and love, an ending that will leave you believing in the power of authentic partnership. Find Part 2. Pinned comment below, as soon as it's available. Don't miss the conclusion of the most intense diplomatic love story ever told. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you'll be the first to know when Carmen and Minjun's journey reaches its breathtaking conclusion. Some love stories are worth the wait, but this one won't keep you waiting long. If you're already invested in their partnership, Part 2 will reward every emotion you felt watching them fight for each other and the principles they believe in.